Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 482 for the 14th of January 2018. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. A little bit overcast, but still quite warm and humid today. Although in the last week we had some pretty big storms, I must say. We had a string of lightning storms. It was very entertaining. And I hope this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone will be equally as entertaining. We're going to kick off with a very important story. The Australian Skeptics Inc. today has launched a campaign to help former naturopath Britt Hermes, who is being sued at the moment for her outspoken views against the profession of naturopathy. Is that a profession? Naturopathy? Naturopaths? Something like that. Now, Britt lives in Germany at the moment. She's a PhD student. And the Australian Skeptics, under the leadership of Aran Segev, who is a reporter on the Skeptic Zone, have decided to help come to her aid. And we've started a sort of an international campaign to raise funds to help her legal defense. That story coming up to kick off the show. And I can tell you that in the only matter of hours since this defense fund has gone online, the contributions are pouring in. It's a wonderful thing to see the skeptical community in action. And, of course, we will be bringing you updates on that story over the next weeks and months. Following that, it's an interview with Trish Hann, who is a committee member on the Australian Skeptics. Trish works at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital here in Sydney. I went to visit her there. And we have a wonderful talk about all sorts of things revolving around medical superstitions. But the conversation, as you will hear, takes its own tangents and alleys, and it's very interesting. It's a very interesting chat with Trish Hann all about superstitions, why people are superstitious when they enter hospital. Well, I guess there's no surprises there. What they do, and her take on chiropractic manipulation as well, and lots of other things. It was a real treat to visit Trish Hann at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. And I'm sure medical professionals listening around the world will get a lot out of what Trish has to say, and I think you will recognize a lot of what she says. It must be the same situation happens in your particular area. Then to round off the show, a very concerning story about the number of preventable deaths that have happened in New South Wales, this state, which may be a result of the efforts of the anti-vaccination crowd. And this story comes to us from the Daily Telegraph newspaper. What a wonderful day I had, folks. I joined the rest of the Australian Skeptics Committee here in Sydney for our annual Christmas lunch. Yes, Skeptics having a Christmas lunch. Well, we had it in January at a Yum Cha restaurant at a huge round table. And it was really nice to kick off the year with this news about the Britt Hermes campaign, and just to see everybody on the committee, as we like to do every year, before getting stuck into more skeptical activism, investigations, reports, stories, and lots of fun at Skeptics in the Pub. And what a fine group of people I work with there at Australian Skeptics. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have nothing, because I ate so much at Yum Cha. What did I have? I had lots of seafood type stuff, lots of prawn dumplings and things like that, and some pork rolls. And I rounded the whole lunch off with jelly, or jello as they call it in North America, little jelly squares. So I did okay. I'm going to run downstairs and just have a drink of water. Yes, well, I do that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. This important story comes to us from skeptics.com.au, published on January the 13th, 2018. Fundraising campaign for Britt Hermes. You may be aware that Britt Hermes, a noted skeptical campaigner, has been taken to court in Germany by US-based naturopath, quote, Dr. end quote, Colleen Huber, claiming that Britt has defamed her. This concerns statements Britt made in a blog in which she was critical of the medical and fundraising practices of the Naturopathic Cancer Society and the Nature Works Best Cancer Clinic. Huber is associated with both. Britt is an American former naturopath who has spent much of her time and effort lately in campaigning against naturopathic practices. She is the author of the blog, quote, Naturopathic Diaries, Confessions of a Naturopathic Doctor, end quote, which she has written since January 2015. She has also addressed many skeptical groups across the world. Just in the last few months, she spoke at QED in Manchester, CSICon in Las Vegas, and Skepticon in Sydney. For this reason, Australian Skeptics Inc. is managing a fundraising campaign to assist Britt in her current legal action. We are concerned by the case brought against Britt, not primarily from the point of view of the merits or otherwise of the libel action, but that the case may have the effect of silencing a major campaigner against unproven and disproven, quote, medical, end quote, practices through the imposition of considerable legal costs. Skeptics will be familiar with the libel action brought by the British Chiropractic Association against Simon Singh in 2018-2010. Following a judgment that Simon used a, quote, fair comment, end quote, defence, the BCA dropped its case. Nonetheless, Simon was still left with substantial legal costs. While no one likes to see anyone suffer punitive costs under such circumstances, Simon is a successful author in his own right and had the support of skeptical groups around the world. Britt is not in a similar financial situation, being a PhD student in evolutionary biology at the University of Kiel, Germany. The current case is being brought against her in a German court, and she is already incurring considerable legal costs in her defence case. With this in mind, we are managing an international campaign to raise funds to support her financially. This is not an endorsement of the statements by Britt that are the subject of this case. We are not in a position to assess the legal merits of the case, but a defence of a leading campaigner in the area that most skeptics would regard as pseudoscience and pseudomedicine. We have had experience in such fundraising, having managed a grassroots funding program in support of Australian campaigner Dr Ken Harvey when he was hit with a, quote, slap, end quote, suit by Sensor Slim, the manufacturer of a bogus weight loss product. The Harvey campaign raised in excess of $40,000 Australian, ensuring that Ken did not have any out-of-pocket legal expenses. The case was found in Ken's favour, and he was awarded costs. However, the company went into liquidation and Ken received no money. If you would like to support Britt, please go to the donations page, links in the show notes, to make your donation. Every contribution will be gratefully received. Please note the following. Point. The funds donated are non-refundable. Point. We cannot guarantee that Britt will win her case. Point. Should more funds be collected than required to cover Britt's costs, they will be held for a period of up to 12 months to ensure the legal risk to Britt has passed, after which they will be donated to Sense About Science or be put into a generalised Skeptics Legal Defence Fund. No entity linked to the campaign, including Britt, Australian Skeptics Inc, ASI, or its collaborators, will receive any funds raised by the campaign. Australian Skeptics Inc is not a registered charity in Australia, and donors should not expect their donations to be tax deductible in Australia or anywhere else, depending on prevailing legal regulation. And that story can be found at www.skeptics.com.au.
It never ends. A friend starts talking about his new Reiki master, and someone else just posted about another all-natural cancer cure that they don't want you to know about. As skeptics, we dedicate a lot of time trying to protect those around us, but there's a way that you can reach millions. Guerrilla Skepticism on Wikipedia is a group that is working to keep the best skeptical information at everyone's fingertips in all languages. Join us. Training is self-paced and fun, and we have our very own super secret Facebook group. You will be educating the world in your sleep. To find out more, email us at gsowteam@gmail.com. Guerrilla Skepticism. The time is now.
Music by bensound.com.
Talk about excitement. I'm outside the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital here in Sydney. It's probably the most famous hospital in Sydney. I'd hazard a guess in the Newtown Camperdown area. I'm with Trish Hann. Hello, Trish.
Hello.
Hello. Now, I planned to meet you here so we could talk about medical superstitions, and it's all happening. We've got fire trucks, we've got ambulances arriving. What happened, Trish? What's the story?
Well, the ambulances are normal. I'm quite happy with ambulances, but I don't normally come outside at the end of my shift to find 6 fire engines parked outside, but apparently a bed upstairs has gone on fire, which is...
Here comes another one. Look, another fire truck.
Another fire truck.
Oh, just around behind this ambulance here, look at all those firefighters all dressed up, ready to go.
We like some eye candy here at the hospital. We do like it when the fireys arrive.
Well, I must point out to you that there are fireys of both sexes down there.
There are indeed. Equal opportunity emergency.
Equal opportunity emergency. And then some announcement going... So a bed might have caught fire.
Sounds like a
hot bedpan or something.
Well...
Electric blanket?
It wouldn't be the first time a patient has had a cigarette in bed while attached to oxygen. Not that I'm speculating.
Not that you're speculating, but...
I am speculating.
Which brings me to a minor point. We're just outside the entrance here, and there are large no smoking signs everywhere, and doesn't do much good, does it?
It really doesn't. Those are actually new as well, but they still get ignored.
Yeah. And we're just peering over at some people who are in very bad shape in wheelchairs and still...
Yeah, standard.
It's the drug, I suppose, they need. So we should find a less exciting place.
Go around this way.
And have a chat about medical superstitions. And how long have you been working here?
Nearly 2 years now.
Really? That long?
Yeah, I know, right?
Time flies.
It does.
We're just opposite the King George V building, where I think my nephew was born.
Oh, yeah, that was a maternity hospital a few years back, yeah.
Yep. It's a bright sunny day here in Sydney. Oh, we're walking past all these fireys now. Because fireys is what we call the firefighters here in Australia.
Fireys, ambos,
Yeah.
It's just cops for police, isn't it? There's nothing particularly interesting for police.
I think, wallopers is an old term.
Oh, now, I wouldn't want to cast aspersions.
No. We're just heading down here past all the ambulances and fire trucks, and it's very exciting.
It'll be quite quiet when we get down.
I'm just looking for somewhere quiet. Yeah. As it happens, drama at the hospital. Well, you know all the secret locations in this hospital, I imagine, for quiet lunches and things.
Indeed. If that door's open, we'll cut through this building.
Radio.
A little fountain courtyard bit that's hopefully the buildings will shade us from all the noise.
Okay. Walking around the back.
Have you seen what's going on over there?
Very exciting. Oh, we're walking through the Kerry Packer Educational Centre. How about that? And Trish is leading me through the building to a secret location.
Indeed.
That is something. We're in the middle of a large courtyard here.
If we're lucky, we'll see the kookaburra.
If we're lucky, we'll see a kookaburra walk down these stairs. And it's a beautiful garden with a fountain in the middle, very laid out. Not very big. And I think if we go over that corner, we might be able to find some shade. Yeah, it's still a bit sunny. Past this beautiful old fountain. Whether it's old or not, I don't know. It looks old.
I think it's probably quite old. Do you
Probably
know the
quite old.
history of Royal Prince Alfred Hospital?
No. Well, it must have quite a history to it. Yeah. Well, I know who Prince Alfred was. Do you know who Prince Alfred was?
I do.
You do?
I do indeed. But do you know why the hospital is named after him and why it was built?
Well, now you're testing me. Prince Alfred was one of the sons of Queen Victoria who came out here on a tour and was shot.
That's correct. So it was an attempted assassination.
Attempted assassination. But I don't know why this is named after him.
It was because of that. So he was saved at a local hospital that existed at the time, and they decided to then build a new hospital in his honour with his name. And apparently, the head radiologist of our department has the bullet that was removed from him.
Really?
Apparently, yeah. It wouldn't surprise me because he's got
18 something and something and something.
Yeah, I think he's a direct descendant of one of the radiologists who was here. So therefore, he has the bullet.
So for our listeners, Trish, you're part of the Stranger Things Down Under group. You're also on the committee for Australian Skeptics Inc. here in Sydney.
I am.
But today we're going to be talking to you with your medical hat on. Your medical hat on. Because you would have seen in your years of service in the medical industry, or should we? No, not industry, the medical profession. That's the word I'm looking for. That's all the conspiracy theory people say, he said industry.
It's not an industry.
It's not an industry. You would have come across some interesting superstition when it comes to medicine, and people who come in here, maybe in an emergency situation, who are clinging to things, maybe.
Absolutely, yeah. We see some interesting, just the things that people literally cling on to. But for their own sort of health, or sometimes it's to the detriment of their health, I'd say. One of the interesting things I've noticed here, though, compared to back home, is...
Back home being England.
Yeah. So one of the very first hospitals I ever worked in, I remember being in the emergency department, and I'd been asked to go out and collect a bed from, I think it was from bed number 15 in the emergency. So I go out to 15 and I'm sort of counting, and I'm like, okay, well, there's 12...
Oh, no.
12A, 14, 15. And it didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me at all. I had no idea why there would be a 12A, but, no 13A or no 11A. And then I had that light bulb moment where I was like, there we go. And then I noticed it as well on one of the other wards. There was no bed number 13. There were 2 banks of 12 beds. So there would be... Side 1, bed 1, side 2, bed 2.
Right.
They could have numbered them 1 to 24, but they didn't. And I can't help thinking it was maybe
it would be quite a coincidence if it wasn't to get around that issue, I would imagine. I mean, do you see it here?
Well, that's the funny thing is I haven't seen it here.
Right.
This hospital is pretty good for that. So we do have a bed 13 in our acute ED. Do
you have a ward 13?
Well, the problem is the wards are numbered by floor, and we don't have 13 floors.
It doesn't go 11, up that far, right?
So, but I can't help thinking that they probably wouldn't worry too much about having it. Like, the wards are numbered, and then they're named by east and west. So
you have rooms.
Yeah, there were 13? Rooms, and there's 13,
right.
And in the few wards that do have that many rooms, but there is definitely a bed 13 on every ward that I've seen upstairs. I'm very impressed with that. But it's funny as well, because in the UK I noticed that while there may not be an emergency bed number 13, there will definitely be an ICU bed 13, but because that's the patients are generally unconscious and they don't care too much. And I think maybe they've come to terms with the fact that even the relatives that are visiting probably won't be paying attention to the bed number when their relatives are intubated or otherwise,
It would be odd for them to come in and say, is he all right? Oh, hang on, he's on bed 13, what's going on? Yeah.
One thing I should find out is whether bed 8 is a particularly popular... Because there is a very large Asian community, especially here in Sydney, and I know that there's a lot of number superstition around that. But the thing is, you don't get to choose what bed you go in. It gets given to you, and a lot of the time you might be waiting for 2 hours before a bed becomes free, so you just get into it as soon as it becomes free. And that's the problem we have in our emergency department, is where things get so full that you don't have that luxury of picking and choosing. So yeah, it's an interesting concept to think how here in Australia I haven't noticed it yet. I mean, obviously, if anyone works in a hospital elsewhere in Oz and they have these superstitions, please let me know, because I'd love to find out.
And yeah, it'd be very interesting. In fact, anybody, medical staff listening around the world, this may be something that's ringing a bell with you. Maybe your hospital doesn't have bed 13 or ward 13s.
Maybe there's even local superstitions that I wouldn't even know about, but that are very, very applicable to certain areas. Maybe there's something to do with certain colours that can't be used or things like that. Who knows? I mean, superstitions are very personal, aren't they? So I guess if it's a local tradition, then it's something that you wouldn't go with. One thing I've also noticed as well is when this is totally universal. So if you're in the emergency department as a patient, you can get away with quite a lot. We get quite abusive patients, we get spat at, we get abused, everything like that.
So because they're not in their right state of mind?
They're not in their right state of mind, or they might be under the influence.
They're in shock maybe, or they're under drugs. Okay.
Yeah, perhaps. And that happens quite a lot, and we're generally very tolerant. We don't want to go kicking someone out onto the street who might then die because we haven't given them care.
Yes, yeah.
But if you want a surefire way to get kicked out of emergency department, you walk in and you go, "Oh, it's quiet in here at the moment, isn't it?" I have been picked up and carried out of a resuscitation room purely for saying that.
Oh, no.
Because it's funny how people see it as a curse. As soon as you say the Q word...
Or we might say, don't jinx the situation. I've heard that. Yeah.
You go in there, "Oh, it's very quiet tonight." "Oh, well, if it all kicks off later, it's your fault."
Yes.
So that's a very, very... And another thing as well that people always ascribe to is... the full moon theory.
I was thinking that...
There's always chaos on a full moon.
Something you might bring up, yeah.
I mean, in my anecdotal experience, it is always chaos on a full moon, but it's occasionally chaos on a random Thursday as well, and it'll be chaos. And I think the full moon thing is more about... it was chaos, then you look at a calendar, then you realise it was a full moon, therefore it was chaos because it was a full moon. And I don't think you pay attention to the times when it was chaos and it wasn't a waxing, it's not something that you don't put that in your memory bank to remember for later.
But if there was something else happening in the sky at that moment on a completely random other day, then you might subscribe.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't know what that would be.
But, some meteor shower. Or
something like that.
Something like that, triffids.
Well, this garden reminds me, these triffids could be coming here any moment now. That fountain is lovely. It looks like something from the Victorian era. It's all green now. I noticed the bird was just drinking from it, and there are bees buzzing around it too at the moment.
It's a beautiful place to come and have lunch.
This is a nice little secluded...
There is occasionally a kookaburra who will come down and swoop your sandwich, so you have to have your wits about you. So another superstition as well. So another thing which you'll find as well in a healthcare setting, and maybe outside as well, who knows, certain people will be known for having really, really terrible shifts. And it's just constant, and whenever they're on, you know that you're going to have a bad time. Equally, if you're having a bad shift and then that person walks in, you know that's the reason why it's their fault.
So you subscribe, you subscribe the bad shift to Mr. or Mrs. X being there or something, whatever.
So you look at your roster and you're like, okay, well, I'm working nights on this night. Who am I working with? Oh no, I've got to swap. I can't do it again. Because
the last time you worked with that person, 6 people came in and something really bad happened.
Exactly. Well, New Year's Eve is generally pretty bad. And
what is that like?
I worked the one just gone. Yeah. I worked from midnight until 8 a.m. And actually, it wasn't much worse than your average weekend, really. I think the following day is worse because the following day everyone wakes up and they realise when the hangovers start kicking in that actually that wrist is more swollen than it should be.
I see. So
or my ankle hurts more than it did
people
last
have
night.
fallen over or whatever. They've gone to bed completely drunk, woken up with a big swelling and thinking, oh no.
Exactly. Unfortunately, one thing that we do see a bit of an increase on New Year's Eve is attempted suicides.
Really?
People who are lonely, same as Christmas, it's one of those things. But another thing we definitely get a lot of is overdoses of people that just don't know how to handle their substances, whether it be alcohol all the way up to other things. One thing which kind of was typical, I reckon, was so I don't know if everyone's aware, but drugs like ecstasy make people very lovey-dovey, and they love each other and they're kissing and they're hugging, and it's all
so I've heard. Full disclaimer, folks. So I have heard.
So on New Year's Eve, you can generally notice when everyone's ecstasy or MDMA has worn off, because then the alcohol kicks in and they start punching each other.
Oh.
So it goes from being
one to the other.
Yeah, all huggy and lovey, and then the MDMA wears off, and the next thing you know, it's broken fists and broken jaws as far as the eye can see. So that was about 2:00 in the morning on New Year's Day. We had started getting those coming in.
So the alcoholic one is, I find interesting, because we all like to have a drink and parties and everything else. I know I've had a couple of nasty hangovers in my life. I guess a lot of people have, but I've never had the stage where I've thought that I was really seriously in trouble. But I suppose that's what you get here. Yeah,
and I think a lot of it as well. I don't know. The lockout laws in Sydney, so a brief description of the lockout laws here are that it was to avoid having situations where people were getting so drunk that they were then becoming violent, and they were doing a thing which was called king hitting, where you punch. One punch. So you go up behind someone on the street, smack them on the back of the head, and then a few situations where those people actually died from that one punch because
they fall over and hit their head on the pavement.
It's absolutely abhorrent behaviour, but the City of Sydney decided to deal with that behaviour by restricting the access to drinking establishments. So after 1:30 in the morning, you can't get into a new place. And the problem that I have noticed is that this local area here doesn't have these lockout laws in place. So we actually do seem to have, and again, this is anecdotally, I don't have the numbers, we do seem to have an increase in that kind of drinking.
People have moved to this area from other areas because they can drink longer here. Huh?
And Newtown used to be a really hippie, chilled out, alternative, quirky kind of place, and it feels now like it's another boozy street.
Yeah.
So that's a real shame.
Well, it is. I mean, Newtown has had a reputation, and I've lived around this area for over 20 plus years, of being the sort of the alternative, laid-back, lefty area.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised that's changed, because the traditional party areas in Sydney have been shut down.
Yeah, completely. Like King's Cross, it used to be the centre of entertainment. And now it's desolate. It's an absolutely empty.
It was for many years, because especially for our listeners out who don't know, King's Cross is an area not too far from the docks, and it was very famous for an area when the sailors came into port, especially during the war and after the war. They'd all run up the hill to King's Cross, and that's where the clubs developed, and the strip clubs and the night clubs and the gambling dens and all that sort of stuff. But yes, in the last few years that's changed dramatically. That's straying a little bit from our topic.
Just a touch. Yeah. So obviously, as well as superstitions from clinicians, there are plenty of superstitions from patients, which we see quite a lot of.
There must be, right?
Yeah, people who, they'll cling obviously to certain icons. So you get patients who refuse to remove their crucifix for an X-ray, for example. It doesn't happen that often. They're generally happy as long as they can keep it in their hand or have it within sight. But I've seen a few patients that have actually flat out refused, and we've had to refuse to do the imaging examination because that necklace would be on their image and it would be undiagnostic. So that's an interesting one. Also, you get people who will have obviously treated themselves to a certain point with maybe herbs or other remedies before coming into ED.
That's interesting.
That's something which is a big problem, because if you're taking, for example, homeopathy, it doesn't matter, because now you're seeking help, so that's fine, and it won't interact with what you're taking. But some Chinese medicines do have an active ingredient, and some of them, I said most of them, are so unregulated that you don't know what the doses are within them.
Of course. Yeah.
So when someone comes in and they've already taken, say, a substance, and then we give them something else, they may react to each other. It may cause an impedance of a reaction, something like that. So that's something we always have to be aware of, is making sure that, especially the older patients who may not speak English, we have to make sure that we're getting a full history of exactly what it is they may or may not have taken. Yeah, but the good thing is, obviously, if you have a high number of non-English speaking patients, you chances are have a high number of multilingual staff.
Oh yeah,
which is really, really helpful.
Which you would have here, I'm sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got a pretty good spectrum. Yeah. So that's something we have to bear in mind. Also, another issue which is close to my heart, we do quite a lot of head and neck CT scans on patients who may have just visited a chiropractor and are now suffering the symptoms of a stroke. Yeah, Richard's jaw's dropped.
My jaw just dropped. Put it back. Wow, that's scary.
It's very scary, and it's to be honest, one is too many, but it's a lot more than one.
Yeah.
And so what happens is a person will go along to see their chiropractor, and they'll have
You do that so well.
They'll have that.
I've had that when I was younger. I had that done to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So they'll have their neck cracked a couple of times, and you've got these arteries which run along your neck, and they can cope with the normal amount of moving your head up and down, left and right, whatever.
At the moment, yes.
But it's when you have that sudden percussive stretch, which you can cause what's called a dissection, and it's where that vessel gets stretched beyond its elasticity, and it just rips. Sometimes it'll rip a neat little hole, and sometimes it'll actually rip a tear all the way down. It's
thousands of listeners all grimacing at the moment.
Exactly. And then what happens is, a lot of the time, it's not instant, the symptoms of the patient. So they'll leave the chiropractor's office and they might go and get a coffee, and then they just start feeling just wrong.
Yeah.
And there's not really any specific symptoms for it. They'll just maybe have headaches, maybe their vision's going. Sometimes just they have this sense of doom, this real sense that something is up. And then they'll attend the ED, and then usually if they say the C word, that they've been to see a chiropractor.
What comes up on the scan?
What it shows is basically blood. It's just bleeding, and they'll either be bleeding into their neck, so that they're just losing blood into their neck, or if it's up at the very, very top by the brain, they can bleed and they can actually have a hemorrhagic stroke, so they can have a bleed on the brain.
Wow.
Which could be fatal.
Yeah,
either of the scenarios can be fatal, absolutely. So that's the thing, is a lot of people think about chiropractors and bones and maybe the damage they could be doing to bones, but you'd have to take some pretty swift movements, I think, to fracture a cervical vertebrae. You're much, much more likely to dissect your arteries there.
Now when I think back, because I had a whiplash injury, which was caused in the playground. I was beat up once, but the injury. Now, you're a medical professional. Can you feel that bump there? That bump has been with me since about 1977, I think. 76, anyway. That bump in the back of my neck. And for years I had migraines, and my dad didn't know, so we went to a chiropractor, and he used to put me on the bed, and then 1, 2, 3, crunk, and that noise you made with your knuckles before. And now I think back, yes, that was a swift, violent crunk. Movement of the neck,
absolutely. And again, so I don't know, you can do it to yourself, absolutely. I crunch my knuckles all the time, and I'll occasionally do my neck all the time, because I know what my limits are. I would never dream of doing that to someone else. I couldn't imagine it, because you don't know what their thresholds for pain.
Very good point. You don't know. I mean, you might know something about the bones, but you don't know how the ligaments
different.
are.
Every person is different. So, for example, I can bend my thumb all the way down to touch my forearm. Not many people can do that. But because I can do it, doesn't mean I could do it to you.
No, I'm trying now. Can't possibly do it, no.
Everyone has very different tolerances for what they can and can't cope with. And that's the problem with these chiropractic manipulations, is that they're so swift and percussive that there's no allowance for differences in movement. And you do get these situations where perfectly healthy, generally quite young people will come into ED and they'll be actively having a stroke.
Wow.
It's terrifying.
That must be terrifying.
Yeah, I think in the States there's been a couple of, I want to say an actor even, who was taken out with a similar thing and actually had some really severe nerve damage as well. And it happens a lot more frequently than you think. The issue being that it doesn't happen on the chiropractor's bed. So it doesn't happen in the office with them there. There's no way of getting back to it. And a lot of the time, they'll say they went to a chiropractor and then we'll scan them and we'll do everything, but we're a bit more focused on saving their life to get the details of the chiropractor. And I think maybe we could be doing more. Maybe there should be a mandatory reporting sort of scenario where you have to say, so for example, if you take a medication and you have a side effect, if it's a new medication, there'll be a slip that has to be filled out for all side effects that come from that medication. And it's just something that has to be reported, so that when you get these leaflets, when you get a new medication, you get this massive leaflet and it's got everything from
the packet insert.
So it's everything from death to Down syndrome that you can get from this medication, because someone at some point has reported a side effect, and it may or may not have anything to do with it, but still they report it.
I was just in the States a little while ago, and believe me, half the advertising on the TV there is for prescription pharmaceuticals.
America and New Zealand, the only two countries in the world where you can legally advertise pharmaceuticals on television.
But the disclaimer
Yes.
These happy people. They're jumping through the field and they're cuddling their kids. People have reported, and it goes on, and death.
yeah, exactly. So that's the thing, is within medications we have this obligation to report every possible side effect and everything that has gone wrong. But with chiropractic manipulations, there's no reporting structure for that.
Why is that?
I think, again, because it doesn't happen in the room. It happens later on. And like I said, no ED doctor is going to want to be trawling through information to get the details of exactly which chiropractor and getting all that kind of stuff together. There should be a way of doing it. I feel like we should have more sort of comeback to get these people and to, like, especially if one in particular has got a bad reputation for doing it. Because that's an issue too, is that you might find that maybe 80% of chiropractors don't do neck manipulations because it's too much of a risk. But those 20% who do could be the ones that are damaging all these people.
Wow, that's an interesting little side trip we just went on, because I wasn't expecting that. To talk about superstitions, but it's all lumped in. It's all part of it. It's all part of the medical profession helping to fight superstition and woo, if we might be general and say it like that. So to round up, what other ones spring to mind when we talk about superstitions in your line of work?
Again, for us, it's a lot of, Thursday nights, I don't like Thursday nights because this always happens and that kind of thing. And most of them are based in reality, in the sense of, that Thursday is the new Friday, so everyone now goes out on Thursday night and they all get absolutely ratted on that night instead of a Friday maybe, so what's going to be worse. But as far as I do actually have personal superstitions. There's things like if I've taken an X-ray on someone who was a bit difficult, I won't put everything away once I've done it, because if I put everything away once I've done it and I process my image will be bad. So I'll keep everything in the room ready to do a repeat image if necessary.
Okay.
It's the same with a lot of other examinations that we do. Like, if it was a little bit difficult, or if it was too easy, that's the other one. If it was too easy, don't act like you've finished. Don't tell the patient, we're all done now, because guarantee you won't be. And that's my personal superstition, which I will never grow out of that. That is something.
Well,
that
it's
works
interesting.
for me.
It's interesting now I think about it, because superstitions are very common where the outcome is uncertain, and
absolutely.
in the medical profession, often and an emergency situation. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
And then, so a little bit of a factoid for people. In all of the medical imaging modalities, of which we have X-ray, we have ultrasound, we have CT, we have a few other interventional types, MRI is the only one that can instantly kill you. Now, how do you think that might be? Do you know what MRI involves?
Magnetic
resonance
imaging.
So,
a very strong magnetic field.
Yep.
So if you have something metallic about you?
So the magnet is always on. It's never off.
Okay.
It's always on all the time. And it's happened in the past where someone may have just brought an oxygen cylinder into the MRI suite, and the patient's been on the table inside the bore, and then the oxygen cylinder gets sucked right inside the bore.
Wow.
And in one case that was quite a famous case, it hit the patient on the chin, because it came up from towards their feet area, came up towards the chin and killed them instantly. So MRI is the only one that can instantly finish you off. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. We're very, very paranoid. And we get to work with Faraday cages all the time.
You do?
Yeah.
Faraday cages?
They have to have a Faraday cage all
in
around.
case of the lightning, right? Or
Yeah.
Why is that?
So that you don't feel the strength of the magnet when you're in the control room, which has a window between you and the magnet.
Wow.
Yeah. And nowadays as well, we've got some pretty cool magnets. So it used to be back in the old days, you'd have like a 1.5 Tesla as your kind of the highest rated magnet that you've got. You've now got up to 7 Tesla, which could do some real damage.
It's like Magneto in the X-Men, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, I'd love to be able to harness that into your fingertips.
Wouldn't that be cool? Well, Trish, thank you for sparing a little bit of time after your busy shift today.
No problem.
Thank you for showing me this lovely little garden. I'll just stand up. It looks like something out of the century before last. I'll just walk up this little path here, and there's it's a sundial. Look at that. It's a beautiful old sundial surrounded by trees and tall buildings. So it's absolutely useless, but at least it's here. And I look forward to seeing you soon on another Stranger Things Down Under adventure, I hope.
Indeed, I hope so.
But for now, from the lovely gardens of the Royal Prince Alfred, Trish Hann, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Richard.
Oh, hi, Trish. Hi. Would you like a coffee?
Yeah, thanks. What are you working on?
I'm trying to come up with a new promo to play on the Skeptic Zone.
Who's it for?
The Good Thinking Society in the UK. You know, Michael Marshall, Simon Singh, Laura Thomas and that crowd.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Oh. They've been doing some great work investigating veterinary homeopathy.
Veterinary homeopathy? What, you sugar pills for cows?
I know, right? And also they're looking at some of the dodgy medical advice given by UK chiropractors.
Really? Okay, look, I'll mention all that in the promo. Now, their website is goodthinkingsociety.org.
And they've recently been reporting on the resurgence of faith healer Peter Popoff.
Peter Popoff, great. Okay, look, thanks for that. It gives me something good to think about. This story comes to us from the Daily Telegraph online, dailytelegraph.com.au, by Danielle Le Messurier, published on the 11th of January 2018. 54 New South Wales children have likely died from a disease for which a vaccine was available, and almost half of the deaths over the past decade were considered, quote, preventable, end quote. There were 23 cases between 2005 and 2014 in which a child's death was deemed, quote, preventable, end quote, or, quote, potentially preventable, end quote, a confronting University of Sydney study reveals. 12 of those fatalities were due to influenza and 5 from meningococcal disease, the most common vaccine-preventable illness. Child healthcare experts urged more expectant mums to get their jabs in the wake of the research, conducted for the New South Wales Ombudsman Child Death Review Team. The opposition said it was a, quote, wake-up call, end quote, for the Berejiklian government. Gladys Berejiklian is the Premier of New South Wales. Coupled with increased uptake of childhood influenza vaccination, maternal vaccination could reduce deaths, quote, particularly from influenza, end quote, but also whooping cough. Quote, an additional 15 deaths would be potentially preventable as of August 2016 due to immunisation recommendation changes, including maternal vaccination, end quote, the researchers wrote. While 9 babies aged 2 months or younger were too young to be vaccinated, it was noted their deaths, quote, may have been preventable through maternal vaccination during pregnancy, end quote. Labor's acting health spokeswoman, Tina Mihaluk, said the state government had allowed the, quote, radical anti-vaxxer movement a free run at influencing mothers, end quote. Quote, this should never happen, and the government needs to do more to counter the deadly spin of the anti-vaxxers, end quote, she said. Australia's Medical Association New South Wales President, Brad Franklin, said, anti-vaxxers were partly responsible for the deaths. Quote, if they convince a single parent not to vaccinate their child due to false information, they're culpable, in my opinion, end quote, he said. While influenza vaccination is recommended for all children between 6 months and 5 years of age, researchers noted it was only funded for those at a higher risk and, quote, coverage is very low, end quote. Chief Medical Officer Kerry Chant said New South Wales Health was working with the Ombudsman in relation to the study. Dr. Chant said free influenza and whooping cough, pertussis, vaccination was available to all pregnant women in New South Wales. Quote, there has been a lot of work on improving immunisation coverage in the timelines of immunisation, and New South Wales Health is continuing to pursue initiatives to avoid the tragedy of preventable deaths, end quote, she said. And here's a quote from Dr. Chant, courtesy of the Macquarie Media Network.
The paper provides an important reminder that children are still dying of diseases that are easily preventable by vaccination, and it's a wake-up call for us that we have to do better. I would like to say that vaccination rates have significantly increased in New South Wales.
And that story comes to us from Danielle Le Messurier, published at dailytelegraph.com.au on the 11th of January 2018.
Ben Radford here. If I can have a minute of your time, I'd like to shamelessly plug my new book. It's called Investigating Ghosts, the Scientific Search for Spirits. It examines ghost hunting and ghost investigations from a historical, cultural, and evidence-based perspective, from the Victorian era to modern TV ghost hunters. It is, in a way, a follow-up to my 2010 book, Scientific Paranormal Investigation, How to Solve Unexplained Mysteries. That book was more general, covering everything from psychics to crop circles to monsters and ghosts. But I realized that ghosts are a special category. Not only are ghosts the most popular paranormal pursuit, but ghost hunting also has its own set of assumptions and challenges. The book will be available soon for under $20 and is currently available as an ebook. For more information on the book and me, check out benjaminradford.com. Please check it out. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you again to those people around the world who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via PayPal or Patreon at skepticzone.tv. And in advance, thank you to all those people who will now chip in, contribute to the Britt Hermes Defense Fund, Legal Fund. And as I said at the top of the show, that's proving already at this very, very early stage something that skeptics, well, they're finding themselves being rallied to the cause. It's great to see. Oh, and some news about the ongoing predictions project that I started at the beginning of last year. Now, I originally thought I would get this project done and have it published in November or January last year. This is where I've collated published predictions by psychics in Australia dating back to the year 2000. But the more I collated, the more it grew, the more I found. It turned into quite a monster. So much so that I've decided now to extend the project for another year. That's fine. I mean, the predictions aren't going anywhere. And I might be seeking your help. We'll see. There are so many predictions to check over. It's an interesting process too, because some predictions are vague and some require a lot of research. Detailed research into financial situations, if that's what a psychic predicted with interest rates here or housing markets there or obscure local issues or things like that. But I can tell you that, more or less, even at this stage of collating and looking at early statistics, it's something in the order of 8% at this stage, 8% correct, which means give or take, and it's sometimes difficult to say, certainly over 90% of what psychics predict is wrong. I can tell you that at this stage. Those statistics will be refined over the coming months, I'm sure. But what's interesting, too, is that I had a lot of skeptical people write their own predictions for last year, 2017, as a measure, as a control, I guess you'd say. And more or less, so far, they're scoring better than the psychics. Make of that what you will. Oh, and thank you to the Bay Area skeptics who mentioned my report with Eugenie Scott about the big trees most favorably. Well, folks, I had such a wonderful time wandering around the big trees with Eugenie Scott. I hope that came out in the report. And thank you to the Bay Area skeptics. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter @Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. You can be part of the show by downloading the Voice Byte app at voicebyte.com and using the hashtag Skeptic Zone. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.